the product of Pygmalion's unnatural marriage to his animated statue, comes in the form of a daughter, we're told, named Paphos, who gave her name to the island, named after her in the Aegean. But that daughter goes and has a son named Cinyras, and the story of Cinyras takes up another narrative strain in here, where Ovid continues this consideration of morality and deviant sexual drives, and it's disturbing. The one of the more disturbing pieces in this book. In it, Cinyras has a daughter of his own named Myrrha. Myrrha develops an infatuation, a sexual desire for her father, for Cinyras, and the obsession that wells up as she is somewhat drawn to the wrongness of it, to the immorality, seems to be giving such an extra tang to her desire. She is brought deeper and deeper into that desire. The more she seems to deny it, the more she seems to become intrigued by it. And she references it in a short speech where she is walking through what is, on one level, a very normal poetic exploration of nature imagery, saying, well, look, all of these other animals in nature have similar drives, similar desires, similar sexual practices. So why is it wrong for me? That's one level that you're looking at it. It is also in the comparison with nature, a kind of Homeric simile. Ovid is always bringing up the formal characteristic of epic poetry and holding them to a critical light, or reflecting on them in some way. And I think there's something going on with that too. But it is also an example of rationalization. He has Myrrha thinking in these terms of rationalizing behavior that is inarguably, I would say, wrong. And but it becomes so objectified by doing it. She is finding an objective correlative, to use one term, where she's saying, well, okay, these other things, these other creatures have these circumstances, have these drives, these desires, but they are not burdened by the same problems or issues or hang-ups, if you will, as human beings. And what does that say about the animals? What does that say about us? It helps to objectify it helps to objectify behavior. It helps to lend some perspective on behavior, which is a way of critiquing it. But it's an interesting little passage. She understood and struggled against her perversion, asking herself, what have I begun? Where will it take me? May heaven and piety and the sacred rights of fathers restrain these unspeakable thoughts and repel my misfortune, if this indeed is misfortune. Yet piety chooses not to condemn this love outright. Without distinctions, animals copulate. It is no crime for the heifer to bear the weight of her father upon her own back. Daughters are suitable wives in the kingdom of horses. The billy goats enter the flocks that they themselves sire, and birds are inseminated by those who conceive them. Blessed the ones for whom such love is permitted. Really, really curious there. The very next line is, human morality gives us such stifling precepts and makes indecent what nature freely allows us. Human morality. Human morality is social. Human morality is a sign of human civilization. It is a product of rational thought. But is it necessarily wrong? She is saying that, well, look, all of those other creatures have these similar drives. Why can't I? The curiousness of dwelling on unspeakable thoughts and then speaking about them is very illuminating. She is, in a sense, thinking. We are brought inside her mind. This is a mimetic thought process that Ovid is laying out, and that alone is fairly unique in the ancient world. But you see her turning these thoughts around, these very critical thoughts, which she's not allowed to speak. She's not allowed to say out loud, but she's thinking them. And that opens up the possibility that, well, other people might be thinking them too. Other people might have similar drives. Other people might see this and be drawn to it and say, well, yeah, me too. So you can see how poetry can be remarkably dangerous to society in terms of unleashing moral outrage or shredding moral standards, depending on your perspective on that. The pressure on her build, she feels it driving a bit of an obsession. She gets involved in she becomes increasingly obsessed. Cinyras' daughter lies tossing, consumed by the fires of passion, repeating her prayers in a frenzy. Now she despairs, now she'll attempt it. Now she is shamefaced, now eager, uncertain. What should she do now? She wavers, just like a tree that the axe blade has girdled completely, when only the last blow remains to be stuck, and the woodsman cannot predict the direction it's going to fall in. She, after so many blows to her spirit, now totters, now leaning in one, now in the other direction, nor is she able to find any rest from her passion, save but in death. Death pleases her, and she gets up, determined to hang herself from a beam with her girdle. Farewell, dear Cinyras. May you understand why I do this, she said, as she fitted the noose around her pale neck. So again, we're brought inside. That is mimetic thought. That is the recreation of the thought process, something very internal, something you don't see very often in the ancient era. But it is, it shows her tortured by these thoughts and working her way through them, one thought after the other, to a kind of resolution. Think about how that mirrors the overall project of this aesthetically as the Metamorphoses, where one thought, like one story, like one character, like one element of a metamorphosis, follows another, one after the other, and represents change. This is her thinking and changing her mind as she goes through. At first, she's really indecisive, and at the end of that passage, she has decided to kill herself. Change. It's everything in Ovid. Again, we get a kind of Homeric simile, a kind of nature imagery of the tree. Significantly, it's great uncertainty. We never know which way this is going to fall. The image of the tree that might fall this way or might fall that way, and the poem tracks that, saying, you know, it could do this. That is very different than the Virgilian project of saying, well, of course, that tree was always going to fall, and it was always going to fall in that direction, and we always knew it was going to happen, so why would we even dwell upon it? It was always a rock-solid certainty in a very orderly universe. You don't get that in Ovid. In Ovid, everything is kind of a up for grabs moment. Everything is fraught with potentiality. Of course, the example also, she's comparing herself to a tree, and that is a callback to how many other trees have we seen? From the cypress tree very recently, all the way back to Daphne at the very beginning. Trees are a significant natural image that are dwelt upon here. The the suicide attempt is interrupted. Let's say she does hang herself, but the struggling and the noise attracts the attention of her nurse. The nurse comes in, finds her, oh my God, and is somewhat distracted, and goes and helps her down. And this busybody nurse, often quite hysterical, is a little bit of a cliche, but well, the cliche sort of begins here. Certainly, Shakespeare is going to seize on this nurse, I would say, for the example of the nurse in Romeo and Juliet, who is very excitable and very very helpful, or trying to be helpful, but really only accelerates the tragedy. And here this nurse is no different. And the characterization of her is always being somewhat chaotic, and she eventually gets to cut her down, but only after kind of freaking out a little bit in a very unhelpful and illogical way. But you see also in the description, like line 490, the nurse was unyielding to Myrrha. Myrrha had been begging her, oh, let me die, let me kill myself, whatever. The nurse was unyielding. And just that one curious word. Well, what is really a sign of something bad for Ovid? In Ovid's world, what is a sign of sure destruction? To be unyielding. Yielding is good in Ovid. Yielding means that you are susceptible and receptive to change, because if change is going to happen and you are unyielding, then you will get broken. The reed in the river that bends rather than breaks. So right there is one little hint early on that things are going to be bad for the nurse. The nurse is going to be a bad influence. And she takes it up immediately and says to Myrrha, well, okay, look, if you let me in on this secret, if you let me be a part of your plans, I will help you. And what is it, the line from line 493 or 4, and your father will be none the wiser. Well, think about this. This is an older woman talking to a young girl and saying that, well, we're just not going to tell your father, wink, wink. Your father, who is the head of the household, the patriarch, if you will, we're just not going to let him in on it. That's revolutionary right there. That is very dangerous right there in the realm of what a Roman would think. So here, Ovid has been very critical of the patriarchy and the conservative family structure that the Augustan government has been pursuing. But here, again, like, well, okay, but the sign of the patriarchy seems to have a special place within that. But the woman appeals to her and says, okay, look, I can help. And on the day of a grand celebration, a festival of Ceres, the goddess Ceres, goddess of grain, there's a festival, and there's lots of celebrating, and Myrrha's mom is going to be gone. So once again, you see, kind of like how the festival of, I believe it's the festival of Venus, allowed an opportunity for Pygmalion to bring his statue to life. Here we see a pious tradition is really the opportunity for an unnatural act. It is the opportunity for sin. Well, ironic, isn't it? Gee, I wonder if that's intentional. So the nurse goes to see Cinyras in his bed late at night because the wife is out doing whatever, and Cinyras has had a couple of drinks, and she goes up to him and says, Cinyras, there's this girl, and she's really interested in you. And he's like, oh, really? He's had a couple of drinks, and he's all alone in bed, and what are you going to do? He tells her, okay, go bring her. She won't tell him his age. She won't tell him anything specific. She will say that she is the same age as your daughter, Myrrha. Little funny there. She goes and she alerts Myrrha and brings him back. And Myrrha is once again sort of torn by some indecision and some hesitation, and we're brought inside that. Thrice Myrrha stumbles and stops each time at the omen, and thrice the funereal owl sings at her his poem of endings. Nevertheless, she continues, her shame lessened by shadows. She holds the dark hand of her nurse, the left hand of her nurse, and gropes with the other blindly in darkness. Now at the bedchamber's threshold, and now she opens the door, and now she is led within, where her knees fail her. She falters, nearly collapsing. Her color, her blood, her spirit all flee together. Listen to that, those images, now this, now that, now that. You are brought in step by step into the poetry, step by step, in extreme close-ups of each of these distinct actions that one after the other mark change in the story, mark development in the story. Nothing stays the same. It is all right up close, and you're seeing it happen in real time. That is a great poetic innovation. And well, she comes in. The nurse delivers her, says, "Take her, Cinyras, she's yours," which has, of course, the double meaning. She's yours, and that, well, she's your daughter, but also she's yours for the taking right there. And the daughter gets into it, and they do it. He called her daughter while she called him father. So the right names were attached to their impious actions, which is just horrifying. But why? All because of these preconceived morality issues that Myrrha was questioning to begin with. So we're not sure where we're going with this. We're not sure. Now he is drunk, and okay, there's all sorts of consent issues and stuff like that attached to this. And he does not know who she is. It's dark. And it happens, and she comes back a couple of times, and she gets pregnant, and he at one point gets curious and insists on seeing. He brings in a light, sees her in the light for the first time, and realizes what has happened, and he is just scandalized. He is just outraged, and he grabs a sword, and he's going to kill her, perhaps himself, who knows. But she flees. She runs, and she wanders around. This is in Arabia. She wanders around Arabia, and she is sort of wandering in the wilderness, not unlike Orpheus after he had realized a love gone wrong, and she seeks escape, and she begs the gods, the divine powers, to transform her. Another metamorphosis. She can no longer endure life as she is. She wants to be transformed. Some god did hear her confession, and heaven answered her final prayer, for even as she was still speaking, the earth rose up over her legs, and from her toes burst roots that spread widely to hold the tall trunk in position. Her bones put forth wood, and even though they were still below, they now ran with sap and not blood. Her arms became branches, and those that were twigs were used to be called her fingers, while her skin turned to hard bark. The tree kept on growing over her swollen belly, wrapping it tightly, and growing over her breast and up to the neck. She could bear no further delay, and as the wood rose, plunging her face down into the bark, and was swallowed, which is another remarkable transformation. It's another tree, significantly. It's another metamorphosis told in very concrete, close-up images. We're never told she became a tree. The word tree is only used once towards the very end, but it was all told in these tight little close-ups along the way. We're not given the entirety of the tree, we're given one element of it at a time. The branches become, or the fingers become branches, and the roots grow out of her toes or something like that. That keeps you focused on the immediate, and it's one after the other, marking change along the way. Change in minute forms adds up to change in a grand form. Change, it's eternal in Ovid, and here he's doing something with it that's quite significant once again. The product of this, remember, she is still pregnant. The baby continues to grow. We're not dealing with, natural forces here, of course, obviously. There are a different set of rules. The baby continues to grow in her belly within the tree, and she eventually gives birth, and it falls out of the tree and is lying there in the grass. And this is the, what is it, the great and great great grandson of the artist Pygmalion. And he is described as, not even envy could have found fault with his beauty, for he resembled one of the naked cherubs depicted by artists, and would have been taken as one if you had provided him with a quiver, or else removed one from those others. He is described in terms of art. He is described in terms of his relationship or potentiality for being depicted as art. And he is, of course, the descendant of an artist, Pygmalion, who famously created a work of art that he fell in love with and developed an unnatural passion for. And this child is the product of that. This child is Adonis. This child is beautiful, and he will have a great, a momentous future development of his own with Venus.